Hello and welcome. My name is John Connor and I head the banking team at Womble Bond Dickinson. Over the past few months, the team has been receiving increasing numbers of questions about the new Building Safety Act and how it will affect lenders. We've also picked up on a number of comments that suggest to us that there are a few myths and misconceptions out there about its relevance and how it will operate in practice. To try and address these and help develop a better understanding of what to expect when the Act becomes fully in force later this year, I've sought the help of three of my colleagues here today. Simon Lewis, who is a senior partner in our construction team, specialising in dispute resolution, and who has taken a particular interest in the legal issues surrounding the introduction and development of the Act. Sarah Wales Canning, who is a managing associate in our construction team, who specialises in advising lenders on transactional construction matters, and Joseph Dean, who is a managing associate and specialises in advising lenders on the real estate aspects of real estate finance. Hello to each of you.
Hello, John.
So, Sarah, I'm going to turn to you to start our discussion, if I may. Why do you think lenders should be actively interested in the Building Safety Act?
Thanks, John. The Building Safety Act is one of the biggest changes to the construction industry in recent history, and so there are a number of points which may impact on lenders providing finance both during the construction and the occupation phases of higher risk buildings. We still don't have all of the final details of the changes that the Act will bring in, but what we do know is it will introduce a number of approval stages which a higher risk building will have to go through during the construction and at completion. These are likely to mean construction programs are longer, and there could also be significant delays before occupation can take place. Not only that, but time is money, so a longer program is likely to mean higher construction costs too. Lenders need to be prepared for longer loan terms to reflect the delays as well as higher construction costs than they are perhaps used to. The Act also extends liability periods, which mean that borrowers have increased risk of claims, and it creates statutory obligations on borrowers, such as the obligation to register higher risk buildings, and there may be fines and even prison where they breach them. Both of these potentially increase the risk of insolvency in borrowers as well.
So Sarah, you mentioned there about higher risk buildings. What exactly are they?
It depends on which part of the Building Safety Act applies, but the parts which will be most relevant to a lender are parts 3 and 4. Part 3 applies during the construction phase and Part 4 applies during the occupation phase. In these parts, a higher risk building is broadly defined as a building containing at least 2 residential units, which is also at least 18 metres or 7 stories high.
Thanks, if I could add there as well. The regulations specifically exclude care homes, hospitals, secure residential institutions, hotels and military barracks and military accommodation in relation to the occupation phase. So it's just, dwell upon this distinction between the design and construct phase and the in-occupation phase. And here's a good example of differences between the two. Care homes and hotels are included as HRBs in the design and construction phase. But as I've said, the others I've already mentioned are excluded anyway. The reason for this is that there is in existence already regulations that govern the areas being covered by the BSA, so we don't want a duplication of regulations that may be inconsistent. There is guidance available to help determine what is and isn't an HRB in both the design and construct and in-occupation phases, but it can get quite complex, particularly in the in-occupation phase.
So are we able to, kind of with the broad brush approach, say it just applies to residential buildings?
No, and this seems to be like one of the most common myths surrounding the Building Safety Act. So, for example, you might have a shopping centre or an office block which has a few residential units within it. Providing that exceeds the height limit, then the whole building would fall within the scope of the Building Safety Act, not just the residential units.
Okay, wow. So the Act then is really wide-reaching. It obviously, we're talking a lot about higher risk buildings, but as you pointed out, Simon, parts of it can affect a whole range of other buildings, including care homes and hotels. And potentially commercial buildings that really ought not to be treated as a high-risk building might be if they're within very close proximity of a high risk of a tall residential tower. That's really interesting. And what again I think probably touches on some of the common myths that we've had coming into the team. One of the other myths that we've or misconceptions that we've had is around sort of the scope of the Act. And it's only dealing with cladding. Cladding, obviously, having been a very big issue for a number of years now. But it's not true, is it, that the Act only deals with cladding?
No, that's right. It isn't true at all. That's just a small part of it. The Act itself it covers a very wide range of issues, including a revamp and strengthening of the building control process, the establishment of the architects training and registration process, the construction products regulations in themselves, which are very significant and still waiting to be developed. And there are also leaseholder protections in relation to paying for remedial works to unsafe buildings, as well as the design and construction and occupation phases of the buildings themselves. And obviously this was, again, has been a matter of great public concern for some time now. So, as we said, parts of this legislation, therefore, refer to all buildings, not just HRBs, which is something to remember. And also remember that building safety risk actually includes and is defined in the Act as risks arising from fire and structural safety. So, yeah, it's not just cladding at all.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.